Hi, welcome to my channel. If you don't know, my name is Allie. I'm a new mother and a nurse. I have a currently 9-month-old son, and I know when I was pregnant and when my baby was born that I was really interested in learning from other mothers' experiences. So I just wanted to share some tips and tricks on things that have worked for me and things that I've learned as my child has gotten older and I've gotten more experienced. Motherhood is constantly changing, and I feel like every day there are new things to learn and to figure out. And so I'm just hoping to pass along the benefit of some of my experiences. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I pump at work as a bedside nurse. When I was preparing to go back to work, I felt very overwhelmed at the idea of managing a pumping schedule, especially in a busy hospital, and making sure that I was going to have all the supplies that I needed and the support that I was going to need. I won't say that there weren't a couple bumps in the road. There was definitely some trial and error, especially in the first couple weeks after I went back. But now, several months later, I'm definitely into the swing of things. I'm in a better routine, and I feel a lot more comfortable with it. So I'm going to cover my pumping schedule and what works for me, and I'm also going to cover what's in my pumping bag. This is going to be a little bit unique to being a nurse, but I definitely think if you're going back to work in any capacity and you're planning on pumping, that you will find some interesting information in here and hopefully some tidbits that you can use in your own pumping journey. So I want to talk about my pumping schedule first. As most of us know, it is required by law for your work to provide you with a pumping room that is not a bathroom to pump in. If the company that you work for is over a certain size, it's a federally mandated law. Unfortunately, the reality of that in certain situations is that, yes, you might have a room to pump in, but it might not be that nice, or it might not be practical for you to get to. In my hospital, we do have a designated pumping room, but it is not even on the floor that I work on. So in order for me to get down there and pump and clean my pump parts and get back up to the floor and do that 4 times a day, it would just be too much time away from my patients. So I do use an Elvie Stride, which is a wearable pump, and I'm going to be doing a more in-depth video about that later on. How I set it up, how I clean it, how I manage it at work, what settings work for me, what supplies that I have unique to that. Unfortunately, it's not the pump that was covered by my insurance. The Elvie Stride is covered by some insurances. So if you haven't yet got a pump and you're looking for a wearable pump, then you could definitely check that out. My insurance covered a pump in a Mia Joy, which is more of a traditional pump. It is portable, but it does have the large phalanges that stick out, and that just wasn't plausible for me at my job. If you do have a private pumping room, the pump that is provided through your insurance might be enough, but for me, I found that the wearable pump was going to be better for me. I did use my Amazon registry completion discount to get the Elvie Stride, and it still cost over $200, so it was not cheap. And on top of that, when you're factoring in maintenance of your replacement parts, it really does add up. So definitely check into your insurance if you're looking for a wearable pump. Otherwise, if your insurance doesn't cover it, and it's just you're not able to afford it brand new, there's some resources online, some groups on Facebook where people buy, sell, and trade pumps. So that's an option as well. So first things first, my pumping schedule. I do work 12.5-hour shifts. I work 7 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. My first pump of the day is always before I get to work. So I feed my baby before I leave for work. If I'm dropping him off at daycare, I put the pump on before I leave the house. I pump in the car while dropping him off at daycare as I get to the hospital, and then sometimes into report. If my husband is dropping him off at daycare that day, then I just put my pump on before I leave the house, and I pump in the car, and then I pump into report. The nice thing about the wearable pump is I can wear a big shirt, and people, especially my coworkers, can generally tell when I have it on, but it's not very noticeable. So your level of comfort is also going to affect that. So unfortunately, it does take me quite a while to empty with the wearable pump. That is the trade-off for it, but at least I can be out at the nurse's station answering alarms, answering phones, answering the door, charting if I need. So I usually complete my first pump of the day after I get to work. And then the second time I pump is generally around 10 o'clock. I try and put my pump on before I get my 10 o'clock meds out. And then I pass my medications and chart while I have my pump on. And then the third time I pump is generally around 2 o'clock. Because I don't need to go to a different room, I don't necessarily pump during my lunch. Sometimes I do take my lunch that late and I pump at the same time, but if I'm hungry, I just eat beforehand and then still put my pump on around 2 o'clock. And then my last pump of the day, I generally put my pump on around 6 o'clock and finish my charting, give a report, and I turn my pump off at some point driving home. I don't have a long commute. I only live about 12 minutes away from work, so I don't have enough time just in the car to pump fully. If you are working someplace and you're not a bedside nurse, it might be a little bit easier to maintain your pumping schedule, but I do find that that is the hardest part. Even if you're not a nurse, it's just easy to get caught up in work or have something else going on. For me, the doctors sometimes want to do rounds right when I'm getting ready to put my pump on, or a patient needs a medication, and it messes with my schedule a little bit, but I do find if I try and stick to those times that works the best for me. So right now my baby is eating about 5 to 6 ounces of milk in a bottle each time. I unfortunately am not one of those people who pumps a ton extra. I think that there are a lot more of us who pump not enough or just enough. So I do have a very small freezer stash, but I am, because I only nurse when on my days off and I don't generally pump, it is sometimes hard for me with the pressure of feeling like I need to pump enough in order to make up for the bottles that he's eating. So I try and get about 6 ounces out every pump. His first bottle is a little bit smaller because he nurses before I leave the house. So if you're finding that you're not pumping enough at work, definitely consider pumping on your days off just a little bit. It does take some of the pressure off of you to get a full day's worth of milk, which just sometimes doesn't happen. So much of our supply is dictated by stress and how much water we're able to drink, and some factors outside of our control. So if you can take the pressure off of yourself in any way of feeling that you need to pump a certain amount each day, it really is beneficial. Okay, so I'm going to move on to what I take to work in my pumping bag. I have a Sarah Wells pumping bag. This was a gift from a friend. These bags are pretty expensive. You will find an overwhelming amount of pumping bags online, on Amazon, in store. Honestly, as long as it carries all of your crap, it doesn't really matter what brand that you get. I would recommend something with a lot of pockets just because it makes it easier to keep your things organized and easy to find, but honestly, there isn't really a requirement for it. A lot of pumps now are a little bit smaller. If you have some of the bigger pumps like the Medela and stuff, you might need a little bit of a bigger bag, but I don't really find that to be an issue. This bag has a couple big pockets on the sides that fit bigger pumps in them. I honestly do not even have anything in these pockets because my pump is just not big enough to justify using that. So obviously the first thing you're going to want to make sure that you take to work is your pump. I know that sounds silly. I have almost walked out of the door without it, not on my work days because I put it on before I leave, but when I've been going other places, especially if I'm charging it. So make sure you have your pump. I mentioned that my insurance covered a different pump, so I actually carry 2 pumps with me to work. In case something happens to my primary pump, I have a backup. So this is that Amita Maya Joy I was talking about. It's small, but it's the phalanges that are big. So this is portable. I like to have it just in case. That means though that I also have to carry the bottles and flanges for it. So I have these wet bags. These are Alva baby wet bags, and they're waterproof lined. I like having these in my bag because they feel a little bit cleaner to take the extra supplies with. I do keep them in a Ziploc bag. These are clean and sterilized. If I needed to use them, I would have them available to me. They're just, as you can see, pretty large. I would have to sit sequestered in an office in order to use these, and it's just, it would be okay in a pinch, but it's just not super practical for day-to-day use. But I do take these with me because if my pump stopped working or one of my parts went bad, then I would be in trouble. So I have that wet bag that I take. I also take an additional wet bag. This one is empty. If I am carrying my Elvie Stride cups, I put them in here. Otherwise, I like to have this just in case something leaks or I need to keep something dry in my pumping bag. In this back zipper pocket here, I keep an extra charging cable. The Elvie Stride, because I have to pump for so long, I generally have to charge it in the middle of the day. So I always make sure that I have my charging cable with me. If you are using a pump that has a specific charging cable, make sure that you have that. This one is just a USB-C, so in a pinch I could probably find one, but it's nice to just know that I have one and where it's at. I also have some extra breast pads. Once your supply regulates, you might not need these as much, but it's nice to have on hand just in case, because then you can be a little bit less worried about leaks. So I keep these in my back zipper pocket so I can find them easily. So there are two little elastic pockets in here, and I have one of them is my wet supplies. So I have hand sanitizer. I would recommend having hand sanitizer with you. I always try and wash with soap and water before I put my pump together, before I take it off and empty it into a bottle. But in a pinch, if you don't have soap and water available, it is nice to have hand sanitizer, because obviously you want that to stay as clean as possible, and you can see that I have had to use it in situations. I keep Nipple Butter. I don't use this as much anymore, but it is nice to have on hand. This is the Earth Mama Organics. I really like this brand. I've had good luck with it. I've been using it since I started nursing, but whatever your favorite kind is good. The next thing I have is the Dapple breast pump detergent to clean my breast pump, and I started using Dapple because it's a little bit of a cleaner brand. It is nice to have just a designated bottle of breast pumping cleaning solution that goes to work with me, so I don't need to remember to put it in my bag each time I'm on my way to work. So I generally have access to soap and water to wash my breast pump. I know some people like to use the fridge method. We have had problems with thrush in the past, so I don't use the fridge method at all, and I'm a little bit maybe over the top careful about how I clean my pump, but I know that the fridge method works really well for people, and I won't go too much into it because I don't do it, so I'm not very familiar, but I know people will keep their pump supplies in the fridge in between pumps, and the fridge keeps it cool enough that they don't need to wash it. But if that's not what you're looking for, then this is a nice little compact bottle to take with to work. And then I also have the Dapple breast pump wipes. So I got both of these on Amazon, and I will link them in the description. These you don't need to have soap and water for, so this is really nice when I'm out other places. If I am pumping during the day, someplace else and I don't have access to soap and water, or in instances at work where I really just need to wipe something down fast, I can wipe these down and they don't require rinsing. It also has a much shorter dry time than when you wash with soap and water. So letting your pump parts dry completely in between pumps is really important for your suction. And so if you're tight on time, these might be a better option. So I take both with. I try and use the soap more often, but I like to have the option of having the wipes just in case. So again, both of these came from Amazon, and this lasts pretty long. This is only the second bottle that I've had to buy, and I'm maybe a quarter to a third of the way through it right now. So it does last quite a while. And I want to say it's only like $8. You, of course, could use whatever dishwashing detergent that you normally use to wash your pump too if you wanted. So that, like I said, is my wet pocket. In my other pocket, I keep breast milk storage bags. I don't use these very often. I try and empty into bottles instead, so that I'm not going through bags super fast. But sometimes, and in the past, I have forgotten my bottles at home, and it is really nice to have this and just leave this in my bag and not have to worry about it. And then I can empty my milk into the breast milk storage bags if I need. At home, I only use breast milk storage bags if I'm going to put them in the freezer. So, but if you are planning on pumping your milk and you're going to put it in the freezer when you get home, it might just make more sense to pour these right into the bag. The other thing I keep in this pocket is extra duck bills. I have duck bills for my Stride in here, and sometimes they fall on the floor, they can rip, and your pump doesn't work without them. So I keep these extra in here. This case was sterilized in my Dr. Brown steam sterilizer, and then I sterilize these parts and I just keep them in here and keep them closed. I do have them available. And then, of course, I have snacks. So I just keep a couple granola bars. I don't use these very often because I'm able to eat at work and bring my lunch with me, but breastfeeding makes me very hungry, so does pumping, so I like to have that. So before I went back to work, the thing that I was concerned about was trying to figure out how I was going to clean my pump at work. If you have ever worked in a hospital or been in a hospital, you probably know that it's a terrifying idea to put your pump parts that your baby's gonna eat the milk that you pump from in those sinks. And so when I was initially looking to go back to work, I had ordered a couple different things on Amazon that I wound up not using. I ordered a camping sink, like a folding camping sink, and when it came, it was huge. I should have looked at the dimensions better, but I think that it was probably almost 2 feet across. This is a big bag, but it is not big enough to fit an entire camping sink in there. So I wound up returning that, and I really just wanted something small that I could put my pump parts in while I'm preparing to clean them. But that would fold flat to go in my bag. And the best thing I found is this little collapsible bowl. So it comes with a plastic top, and it just pushes down and turns into a bowl. And that's it. And it is big enough for me to fit my Stride cups in here. I can leave them upright until I'm ready to pour the milk out, and then I can keep them in here to keep them clean. I also transport my sponge that I use to wash my pump parts in here so that it doesn't get anything else wet. So then when you're done with it and you're ready to fold it back up, you just press it down and it folds flat. Even with it folded flat, I can still fit my sponge in here. I can pop my lid on, good to go. The other thing that I ordered a drying rack, and I think the drying rack I initially ordered was specifically for baby bottles. Again, it was huge, and it wasn't practical enough for what I needed it for. So again, I got the collapsible bowl and this drying rack on Amazon, and I'll link them down below, but this is the drying rack I wound up getting. I needed something with a tray because I can't guarantee that I'm going to have access to a sink for very long at work. So I needed something that was going to drip into a tray and not get what was underneath it wet. So this is nice, but it also comes with a couple little, they look like trees almost. You can pop them onto the drying rack and hang things on them. So when I assemble it like this. It came with 4 of these trees, but I only use 2 of them when I go to work. I just keep the other 2 at the house because I don't need them. So depending on your pump, you may or may not benefit from these trees, but they are really nice if you want to hang bottles upside down on them. The Elvie Stride, the cups come apart. I can just slide these on here. I have inserts that I use that can go on here as well, and it helps them dry faster. Like I mentioned, it is really important that your pump parts dry totally in between pumps, and if you have them and the water is collected in them and you don't have them upside down, it's going to take a long time for them to dry. So this drying rack is extremely helpful. It has enough areas here that I can hang everything, which helps it dry a little bit quicker. And then at the end of the day, I can just take this off and dry this tray out, put this back on, and then I just pop these off. And this whole thing fits pretty flat. You can see it's pretty flat. I can just put it right back in my pumping bag. Full disclosure, when my friend gave me this pumping bag, I was looking at it and I was like, this is huge. At the time, I just had the Ameda Maya pump and it's pretty tiny. And I was like, what am I possibly going to need to fit in this pumping bag that's going to take up all of this space? Let me tell you, you need it. You need the space. So I'm going to put this back in. I mentioned that I like to pump into bottles. So when I was pregnant and I was researching bottles, I wound up purchasing these glass Dr. Brown bottles, and they're the wide mouth bottles. They were supposed to be great for breastfeeding. I liked the idea that they were glass and not plastic. My baby would not take them. We tried a ton of different scenarios. My mom came over, I left the house. He wouldn't take a bottle from this. We wound up using the Lancino plastic bottles. But these work really great for milk storage. A lot of the bottles that I've found that are small enough to fit only go up to 4 or 5 ounces. And the line here, right here, is for 5 ounces, but you can definitely fit up to 7 ounces in that. So when I was using my smaller bottles, I was filling them up, having to use 2 bottles per pump. And after I'm done filling these bottles, they go in my lunchbox in the fridge for the rest of the day. And I also keep my food in that lunchbox. So I needed bottles that were going to be small enough to fit in my lunchbox after, but that had enough that I could put a full bottle's worth of milk in here. So I keep 4 of these bottles in here. And they are obviously liquid proof, so if they do tip over in my lunchbox, I don't have an issue with them spilling. I have little Lancino bottles. They're plastic that I tried to take, but I don't feel as secure with them. I have had a little leak in them, and that is devastating. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing how you're going to bring your milk. Like I said, I like to pour into bottles when I'm able to, because then if I am working again the next day or my baby is going to daycare, I can pour this right from this bottle into the bottle he's going to take for daycare. And then I'm not using so many breast milk storage bags. I feel a little bit better about it being glass, and then I can also just pop it in the fridge until I'm ready for it. And then if I do need to put it in the freezer at that point, then I can transfer it to a breast milk storage bag. So everything fits pretty compactly in here. You can see. Like I said, if you are not needing so much space, you can get a backpack, whatever is going to work for you. I do have some ice packs that I take with sometimes. Again, if I'm not going to work and I'm not going to have access to a fridge, then I have a little small cooler bag and some ice packs that I can put in and pop that in my bag as well, so that I can pour my milk in there and not be worried about it going bad. The other things that I make sure that I take with to work are my water bottle. I know that sounds silly, but this is my service water bottle. I don't go anywhere without it. Easy to refill throughout the day, and then generally keep track of how much water I'm drinking. You're definitely going to want to drink water. The other thing I take with is a body armor. There is some conflicting stuff about this because there isn't like studies done on how this helps milk production. It does have coconut water, which is like pretty widely accepted to help with milk production. Just anecdotally, I have found that when I drink one of these during my first pump of the day, that it does seem to help with my milk production. A couple other things that I would recommend having with you that I do not currently have in my bag is, of course, a pumping bra. If you need that for your pump, it is nice to have the option to be hands-free regardless of what kind of pump you're using. And then I would recommend, no matter where you work or what kind of pump you have, that you bring an extra shirt. Especially at the beginning while your supply is regulating, it is definitely easy to leak a little bit, even with breast pads in. And then of course, no matter what kind of pump you're using, there is always the chance that you're gonna have a little bit of a spill. Last week, I had leaned over too far and I had a little bit of a spill, and I was so glad that I had an extra shirt. I just keep mine in my locker at work, but you can definitely carry it in your pumping bag with you, and it's really nice to have on hand. So just really quick on my setup at work. When we have an open room on the unit, I like to have all my pump supplies set up in the open room by the sink. I grab a couple towels, I put them on the counter, and I'm able to put my drying rack and my wash bowl out and then leave my pumping supplies in the room. It's also a little bit easier to put on my pump and take it off in that room as well. Realistically, what's been happening more times than not is that we do not have any open rooms on the unit, and I'm not able to utilize that. And so I'm lucky enough that my manager lets me use her office to keep my pumping supplies in. We do have a locker room, but it's down at the opposite end of my unit, and it's just not very easy to get down there and get stuff put on. And it's just not a very big locker room, and I don't have a very big locker, so it's not a great setup. I do wind up having to wash my pump parts in a separate room and then bring them back to my manager's office to dry. If you don't have an area where you can easily set your stuff up, or you don't have access to your facility's pumping room like I don't, it's going to be a little bit more of a problem, and you'll probably have to be a little bit more creative about where you leave your pump supplies. That can definitely be an adjustment at the beginning, but I feel like once you find something that works for you, then it's pretty easy to make it work. So as far as like little tips and tricks for work, things that have worked for me, things that have really made a difference. Sometimes I will bring heat packs with me. There have been days where just because of stress or not drinking enough water, whatever it may be, that I'm having a hard time getting a letdown. And sometimes the heating packs will help. I'll just kind of tuck them in my bra, and that helps with my letdown. Some people say that looking at videos of your baby or pictures of your baby can help as well. I have had mixed success with that, but also sometimes I just don't have time to sit down and really relax and take a look at those pictures and videos, but that might be helpful. When you wash your pump supplies, this is again gonna sound like it doesn't make as much of a difference as it does, but when I wash my pump parts after I've rinsed them, I shake them quite a few times to get as much water off as possible before I put it on the drying rack. The diaphragms for the Elvie Stride are big discs, and if you just put them on the drying rack, there's a little lip that collects water on them, and I have found time and time again that they do not get dry in between pump sessions unless I really make sure that I dry them off well. Some people carry 2 sets of pump supplies to work with them, and they alternate, so while their first set is drying, they use the second and then switch off that way. Like I mentioned, Elvie supplies can be kind of expensive, so I do not have 2 sets of supplies. I have replaced my duck bills and my diaphragms as needed per the recommendations from Elvie, but in general, I do not. I don't just have the ability to have a second set of pump supplies. So getting those dry, shaking those off is really, really helpful. The other thing is that if you have days where you're pumping or you have bottles that look really similar, it is really easy to forget what days these were pumped. So I have a dry erase marker that I use, and I just write the date in dry erase marker that I pumped these, and it erases right off when I'm done with it, but I can put it in the fridge and make sure I can keep track of what day the pumped milk is from and make sure I get it in the freezer in time if I'm not going to use it. So I've found that to be really beneficial. I think that is everything. It sounds like a lot of information. It is really hard to go back to work and pump at first until you really kind of hit your stride with it, no pun intended. But it can be difficult at first, and so expect a little bit of trial and error. Definitely feel like you can advocate for yourself if you're not getting enough time to pump, or if you need help covering your patients or your workload if you need to get your pumping sessions in. It can be hard to maintain your supply too when you go back to work. I am lucky enough that we self-schedule, so I try not to schedule my days back to back if I don't have to, and that way I have a day in between just to nurse my baby and keep on a good schedule at home, so my supply is not as impacted as it might be. If that's something that is you're able to do, especially when you first go back to work, it does seem a little less overwhelming. Sometimes it can be hard to get home and get your bottles changed over and get everything clean and sterilized for the next day. And so I found just having a day in between was really helpful for me at the beginning. Besides that, if you're having issues with your supply, then, you know, reach out to somebody. If you have a lactation counselor in your area, that may be beneficial too. But it isn't, definitely going back to work as a nurse and pumping is not something that's easy. If you work in the ER or the OR, someplace where it's not as easy to maintain a schedule, then you might have to be a little bit more flexible with it. And that's where those wearable pumps sometimes help. But if you have any other tips and tricks that have worked for you, feel free to leave them down below for other people. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those down below too. Thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe. I'm going to be posting videos pretty regularly about reviews on baby products, things that we loved and things that we didn't, and just things that I've experienced and have learned over the course of having a 9-month-old. So thanks very much for watching.